I'm John Madden. I've been involved with Lingfield Nature Reserves for nigh on 20 years now. In the mid-90s, this was going to be turned into a housing estate, and some very forward-looking and brave people stopped that happening. And there was then a consultation, and the village was asked, what do you want done with the land? And the answer that came back was, we want a nature reserve. And now it is an incredible wildlife haven full of rare and interesting species and habitats. But despite that, it's turned into something really special for biodiversity. It's got an incredible array of species that are found here. A lot of them are very rare, very unusual. Some are restricted just to certain parts of England. So it's been a fantastic success story. I'm now in the community orchard. It's designed as a traditional orchard. You see the trees are nicely spaced apart, about 5 metres. And the selection of trees was such that they've grown to a good height, like a traditional orchard. There's everything in here, believe me. There's apples, pears, cherries, mulberries. One of the things that I'm particularly proud of, just because I find it really interesting, is we've got mistletoe that we've managed to introduce. It's a parasite and it's on a lot of the apple trees, and it's now established and doing well. And people come in here at Christmas time and take a bit for decorating the houses. The grassland is very different, and you're going to see, as we go round, you'll see lots of other grasslands. This is really fertile and really thick and luxuriant. We still mow this like a meadow, so a tractor, believe it or not, gets in amongst all the trees and we take all the hay off. But slowly, bit by bit, we're turning areas of it into much more species rich as we get yellow rattle and things like that established. So it's going the right way. And of course, it's really, really popular with the local people because they come in and take the apples in the autumn, and the plums, and everything goes. I mean, it is lovely the way the people come and use it as an orchard, and I think even some of the local kind of food banks and things use the fruit for that. So it's quite broad the way it's used. It's just a lovely space. So we're in the butterfly garden now. It's a fantastic place for insects. You can see how sunny and sheltered it is because it's surrounded by trees and shrubbery. It's got the sun to the south directly on it. So absolutely wonderful place, and you can just see all the flowers, a mixture of exotics, wildflowers, everything. We've had some fantastic butterflies over the years. Brown hair streaks, which are quite a rare canopy species, come down and they nectar on the hemp agrimony, and we've got big banks of it over there, so you can actually photograph them at eye level. That is really unusual and a really fantastic thing to do if you're a lepidopterist. They get very excited. And of course it's fantastic for birds. You can hear the great tits, blue tits, black caps, chiffchaffs, nuthatches, the odd tree creeper, goldcrest. They all come in here. There's a pond to drink in, there's lots of shelter, lots of place to nest. So it's got so much going for it. And the famed longhorn bee comes in here as well. So I photographed them the other day feeding on these geraniums that are all around me. So it's a really good area for all sorts of things. I actually do a butterfly transect. And what that means is every week I walk a fixed route and count the butterflies, and I give that data to butterfly conservation, so that's all in their database, and they do all their clever science with that. And I've been doing that for 20 years. And actually, interestingly, we're having a moth trapping session next week. We've been doing that for a few years. A local expert comes in, sets up a moth trap. A few of the people from the village come along, including little kids and things. It's quite nice. But he's found some really interesting species. So we know that there's a thing called the grass rivulet, which feeds on yellow rattle, which is a plant that we introduced. So it's a rare moth that's here because we introduced another plant, and that wouldn't have been there if we didn't manage this place in the way we do. So, you know, there's a lot going on in terms of moths and things. What we'd love is some entomologists to tell us a bit more about all the bees and the hoverflies and the things we don't know too much about, but that I strongly suspect we have some interesting species. We're now in the quiet garden, and we're just literally over the hedge from the butterfly garden, so it all forms part of this mosaic of different habitats. But what I wanted to show you in here is this meadow experiment behind me. This is only 3 years old. There are literally hundreds of common spotted orchids in here, and you can just see the diversity of flowers. I mean, I've counted up to 60 species. So it's been an amazing success in how to create a meadow, and it's a fantastic case study to show people, because quite frankly you can say, look, we've done this, so you can do this, you can copy this, look how rich it is. And it's a magnet for insects. You've got all that pollen and nectar, so it attracts them in. And I have seen those longhorn bees I keep banging on about in here. So they're coming here purely because there's all this nectar here. It's a fantastic example. And once again, great for birds because we've got all this shrubbery and different heights of trees, different foliage, berries, flowers in the spring, brambles, everything. Every butterfly feeds on brambles virtually. I mean, they're covered in flowers and they're just a fantastic nectar source. So we've got everything we need here for the wildlife. But as I say, this meadow is really becoming special. We're now in Bloomer's Field, and you can see this wonderful new habitat that we've created in just the last 3 years. It comprises a gentle slope into a ditch, which obviously is wet in the winter. Now it's bare clay. Then there's a vertical slope, a long bank that's becoming more and more wildflower rich, and then behind it on the lee of the bank is a hedge of hawthorn and blackthorn. One of the most exciting discoveries we've had on this new habitat is the fact that we did an egg count of brown hairstreak eggs during the winter, and in this 80-metre stretch we found 20 eggs. Now that is a really good number. And the brown hairstreak eggs have a very restricted distribution in England. They're quite a rare butterfly, and clearly they're doing extremely well here, and not least of all because we've created this fantastic habitat for them. But it's also good for all sorts of other things. You can see how it's a bank of nectar with all those wildflowers. There's loads of spaces for small mammals, hopefully reptiles and amphibians, to hide in at the base of the hedge. And basically it brings complexity to the reserves. So we're in Beacon Field, and what you can see here is the result of nearly 30 years of hay cutting. If you'd come here 30 years ago, you wouldn't see all these wildflowers, all the cat's ear and all the yellow rattle, etc. It probably would have just been grass and not that many species. There's a real diversity of flowers, which means seeds, which means nectar, which means pollen, which means insects. And it's now got to the stage where we're actually listed on the government's Magic Maps website, which anybody can look at, by the way, as high priority lowland grassland. And that is significant because the only other areas that are on that map are things like sites of special scientific interest like Blindley Heath and Lingfield Nature. So we're in that league now. This has become so diverse florally that's been recognised in terms of it being on that map. And the other important thing to say is neutral grassland like this is a really rare habitat. Apparently, according to the Surrey Nature Partnership, there's only 33 hectares in Surrey. Well, we've got 10 hectares here. So put that in context, this is a really rare habitat that we are managing well and is getting better and better every year. We're now by the Scout Hut ponds. If you imagine it, 30 years ago this was just the corner of a field, completely flat. Everything you see behind me was created in the last 30 years and now it's really mature. And it's become very special because we have at least 15 species of damselfly, dragonfly, demoiselle, but we also have great crested newts breeding, and it's supposed to be one of the best places in East Surrey for great crested newts. And not only great crested newts, we have smooth newts, we have palmate newts, we have grass snakes, we have frogs, we have, well, common frogs, marsh frog, toads, really special. It's full of invertebrates, of course. Dragonfly larvae, great diving beetles, all these species that love wetlands, and they're thriving here. "30 years ago, this was the corner of a field. It was just a paddock, and you can see it's a woodland. So it was planted, and nurtured, and now 30 years on, they're all mature trees. But we don't want a stand of trees all the same age. So what we're now doing is we're starting to coppice and pollard. Now what that means, and you can see there's trees in the background that basically have had the tops cut off and they reshoot. But in the 4 or 5 years it takes for them to grow back into large bushes and small trees, you've got all the light in the clearing, which attracts insects because it's warm, it's sunny, and you can see all the foxgloves and all the other flowers that have come up through us seeding with a woodland mix. And this is what we'll have to do now in the future to keep this woodland as biodiverse as possible, to manage it carefully. And that means every year, hopefully, we'll pick another bit and we'll coppice and pollard and do it cyclically all round the woodland year after year, just to add all that complexity and all the biodiversity you can see. The reserves are now 30 years on and we've created something amazing. It's so biodiverse and it gets better and better every year. But the question is, what's going to happen over the next 30 years? We've talked about pollarding and coppicing and the kind of management interventions we're bringing in for a mature nature reserve that's 30 years old. But there's a bigger question really. This will always be the nature reserve, but it's set in a landscape, it's set in a countryside where biodiversity is just bleeding out. And we've thought long and hard about what can we do to reverse that. So we're now the lead organisation in a farm cluster called Eden for Nature. And the whole idea about that is to set Lingfield Nature Reserves in the middle of a biodiverse corridor of connected habitats, hopefully that one day might even stretch from Blindley Heath in the west right across to Edenbridge in the east, full of, as I say, different habitats. It'll be really important to have it full of livestock to manage in a way that encourages lots of biodiversity, hay meadows, ponds, wetlands, connecting ancient woodlands which will be pollarded and coppiced. And that's our ambition now, to take it to the next level.